A lot of business owners have become extremely frustrated and, frankly, quite often just flat out burn out because the changing dynamic in the workforce.
Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Ideal Investor Show, where I'm always trying and bring you, the audience, great content, things to be aware of. And today we have one of those situations. I just said before we started recording, I'm probably too small a person for Cameron Bishop, our guest today, but he made it anyway. So Cameron, welcome to the show.
Well, great, Axel. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm honored that you make the time as somebody so accomplished as you are with so much experience. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot. I always say when people ask me, what's the trick? What's the hard thing? Or I can't really do podcasts or stuff like that. I say, well, if you take the attitude to say every single opportunity to speak to somebody you interview is a learning opportunity, then it makes the whole thing so much easier. And so I'm grateful. But before we dive into the details, tell us, Cameron, a little bit on the audience, obviously. How did you get to where you are? What's a little bit of like the background, the origin story for Cameron Bishop?
I wish I could say it was a planned career journey, but it was not by any means so. So I started my career as an advertising copywriter, working in a small technical trade magazine publishing company. And we eventually got acquired by a Fortune 100 company in New York. Maybe many people know of Macmillan Book Publishing, their textbook publisher. And they said, hey, we really like your company. We want you guys to grow by going out and buying other companies. And we started doing that. We had no education, no training, but you get a PhD in acquisitions really fast, especially with the mistakes you make. And we grew that business. I was there 23 years. We grew it from 7 billion to 400 million in revenue and about 100 million in profits. So I left there and started a business similar, same model, with JP Morgan Chase Bank's private equity division. And we grew that over 3 or 4 years to 120 million. And then from there, I consulted as an exit and transition partner in a small consulting firm. I've done a very complex turnaround on a $60 million 501c3 charitable business and finished that up. And I said, gee, what do I want to do next? And I like buying and selling companies. So I moved into lower middle market investment banking.
Very cool. And that's your own business now, right?
Well, I'm a managing director and a partner in the firm. Our firm is actually headquartered out of Denver, Colorado. We're a very virtual firm, so I actually work from my home office in Kansas City.
Right. Well, okay. So you're a part owner. All right, cool. Very, very good. And thank you for describing that. So you kind of hinted already before we hit the record button that you see a lot of people, and I'm part of that generation, some people call it the baby boomers or the golden generation, where you reach a point in your life where you're asking yourself, and for the audience, you don't have to be worried. I love the mentoring and coaching, so I'm not going to go anywhere. But I mean, if you run a business, especially like you said, when the next generation is potentially not interested to run the business, or maybe the business is in a location that they don't want to live in or stuff like that, that the question becomes, okay, what do we do? Do I work forever, or do we find some other solution? So can you tell a few of the things that are reasons, and then maybe weave in what you see, what maybe the wrong mindset or the wrong assumptions are?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so when I was on the buy side of acquiring companies, people don't understand how difficult the process is to either buy or sell a company. It's extremely difficult. And for every company, when you're on the buy side, every company you buy, you probably look at anywhere from 35 to 50 companies. I've acquired about 50 businesses over the years and spent over $500 million doing that. So you get quite a sample of various kinds of companies. And one of the characteristics we always see, and I see that now, even when I'm on the sell side of working with business owners, is they just make so many mistakes around how they operate their company that they either create a situation where their company is simply not sellable, or it's going to sell for a lot less than it really could if they properly prepared. And so it's kind of a personal mission for me at this point. Yes, I love selling companies. I love representing business owners, but that's a big part of it for me and frankly for our firm is to truly help these individuals. And as you mentioned, Axel, we're at a point in time where the baby boomer generation, and clearly with my gray hair, I'm one of those also, they're aging out. What's the statistic? I think 10,000 baby boomers turn age 65 every single day. The trends for most of these business owners, they don't have children who are interested in being in the business, and they look around and say, well, what am I going to do with this company? And they finally decide, well, that's their primary source of potential future wealth. So they make the final decision to sell their company. And the sad fact is, and this is from multiple sources, I think Pepperdine's Business School was the first place I saw this, is that about 70% of companies that go up for sale never actually sell. So the logistics and odds are very difficult. And with more and more companies coming to market, it creates more of a buyer's market. And that, of course, supply demand drives down valuations over time. So we really focus on trying to help these business owners, and especially to begin to think well in advance of when they might decide they want to exit the company.
Right. And I want to touch on that a little more in a moment, but I have one other question, because that has basically, in a sense, occurred to me, even though it may in the end not really be that big of a deal anymore with my own company. But I mean, pretty much almost through my whole lifetime, at least for all the many decades that I've been in the US now, I've pretty much seen the kids get, towards the end of high school and they start applying for colleges. The kids almost never applied for a local college. So in a way, I'm kind of curious to say, okay, this whole notion, like I finally leave the nest and I go, like if I'm in Kansas, I apply for somewhere in Boston or somewhere in Chicago or somewhere in California and stuff. The reason I'm asking this is, and I'm not sure if this is really empirically valid, but I have read several places that a lot of people, when they then graduate from the university, that they find a job oftentimes close by because they already did some summer projects, or they know the area now after living there for a few years and stuff, or they want to stay with their friends. So the number of people who go back to where they came from and finished high school is relatively small. Do you think that has a significant, or is a reason why few want to take over the family business?
I certainly think that's one of the dynamics. I have 5 children, and for example, one of them went to, again, I'm in Kansas City. One of them went to Colorado State and Fort Collins. She fell in love with it out there. And after her freshman year, she just never came back home. She's a very successful CPA with KPMG in the Denver area now, but that's certainly part of it. But I think another big part of it, Axel, is that the kids of these business owners see how truly hard their parents worked in the business. I mean, owning a company, people don't understand it if they don't own a company. It's a 24/7, 365 job. And, the kids see what their parents did, the sacrifices they made to build a company so that they were fortunate enough to be able to go away to college, but they just say, that's not what I want for my lifestyle. It's neither right nor wrong. It's just a changing set of dynamics, but it leaves these business owners with fewer options for an exit. And in most cases, I've said that's the primary, sometimes sole source of their wealth. And it's often means generational wealth if they can find a buyer for the business. And smart business owners know whether they like it or not, one way or another, they're going to leave their company. So they can either be proactive about it and leave it standing up, or they can leave it to their heirs to try to figure out what to do with.
On that point, real quick, do you feel that has gotten worse, that the kids, because I hear a lot, because I do obviously on the side still consulting for more or less like Fortune 1000 kind of companies, and they're complaining quite substantially about the graduates that they're basically recruiting for regular employment, not normal like 9-to-5 jobs, that the expectations seem to have migrated to a lot of demand and very little performance. I don't want to generalize that, but that would be another contributing factor to say, okay, you just mentioned how hard a business owner, especially in the beginning, has to work. versus, okay, I have a job that has a very clear frame that I just need to meet expectation. You think that has gotten worse over time since you've been doing it for a while, or has it always been like that?
I do think it has become more aggravated for sure. Again, with fewer and fewer children of entrepreneurial parents, or either family-owned companies or privately owned companies. Both seem to be the case. But it's interesting, Axel, before COVID happened, when a business owner calls us and say, "I'm thinking about selling my company," very first question we ask them is always, "Okay, why are you thinking about this?"
Right.
And oh, but it's an interesting change in dynamics, really. The answers would generally be, hey, I want to play more golf, I want to travel, I want to spend more time with my spouse, I want to spend more time with my grandchildren. Those kinds of typical retirement related answers. Post-COVID, those answers still exist for sure. So
Yeah.
don't get me wrong,
Right.
but in many cases, the changing dynamic in the workforce, a lot of business owners have become extremely frustrated and frankly, quite often just flat out burn out because their first answer will be, I can't find help. I could grow my business, pick the percentage, 10%, 20%, if I could get more employees, especially say in construction related industries, which require crews of workers. I either can't find them or I find them and I hire them and they don't show up for work, or I find them, I hire them, and they work for a week or so, and then they ghost us and don't give us any notice. And a lot of business owners have just, frankly, they've just gotten tired of trying to deal with that employee-related talent recruiting challenge. So that's just another complexity in the path of being a business owner.
Absolutely. That reminds me of a little story I know of. I used to live in the Santa Barbara area in California, and a little bit north of Santa Barbara is where a lot of the strawberry fields, like an area called Santa Maria and northward, massive strawberry fields. And I happened to befriend a farmer who was specializing on strawberries. And that was, I don't remember exactly how many years ago, when the whole discussion was about $15 minimum wage. So he was struggling to find people, and especially there were some changes with the visa for the Mexican workers. There's a certain visa type where they can come for a harvest and then go back to Mexico. And he had a hard time getting enough, and so he basically advertised harvesting of strawberries, $15 an hour, because that was everywhere in the news as, you know, the thing. And he had, I think he said 500 applications in that frame window that he actually tried it. Of those 500 people, 100 over the whole period of about 3 months showed up, and nobody made it longer than 3 days. Because the argument was, you know, like, we need to change this from immigrants to American workers. He said, okay, when somebody sees what kind of work that is to go down in these trenches, and they're literally trenches to pick the strawberries, 3 days was the longest that people made, and then they left. So yes, the $15 you could argue was enough or not enough, but the work was just, they said the work was too hard. Hey, let's take a quick break for a message from our sponsors. If you're serious about growing your wealth, you know the best opportunities aren't always the most obvious. That's why we've partnered with Bob Bernodas of Franchise with Bob. He specializes in helping investors like you leverage franchising in an overlooked but highly profitable way to create semi-passive income. And for a limited time, Bob is giving our listeners access to his course on franchise investing for free. Inside, you'll learn how to evaluate franchises, minimize risk, and maximize your returns. This course is normally sold for $499, so don't miss out and claim your free course now at edu.franchisewithbob.com/ideal. You said earlier, and I wanted to come back to that, two things. And I would like to ask you to expand on that a little bit. You said it is more difficult than people understand or assume when you want to sell or when you want to buy, and it takes proper preparation. Can you expand a little bit how long of preparation from, okay, I think I don't want to do this forever until you're ready, and what makes it so difficult?
Well, those are great questions. Again, that's a central part of my message to try to help business owners understand. So, one of the key mistakes, Axel, that business owners make is that they just kind of keep going and going, and they suddenly, quite literally oftentimes, and I've had them tell me this, wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm done doing this. I'm going to sell my company. And that's a really significant reason why either their company won't be sellable or will ultimately sell for a lot less than it could otherwise if they properly plan. So ideally, in a perfect world, and we don't see this very often, but if they started really thinking about their exit strategy 5 years before they exit, then they would be in a much, much better position, especially if they seek out some professional guidance from consultants who can help guide them on the best way to structure their company. But even though we rarely see somebody thinking 5 years ahead, at least 2 years, they can begin to properly position and structure the business so that they can go into a transaction process. And then they also think, well, I'm going to sell my company and I'm going to get it done in a month or two, and that's going to be it. And generally, the national average, no matter what size a company is or what industry they're in, unless somebody just comes to you and says, hey, I want to buy your company,
Right.
then obviously you can get a quick deal done. But if you have to go out and try to market the company, it's from the time you work with a professional to help represent you to sell the company, if you're lucky, it's a 9-month process from the time you begin to the time that you get a check or a wire transfer in your bank account. So business owners need to start really thinking further ahead for those reasons. And the reason they need to start working in advance is it's a pretty standard fact that about 95%, if not more of the time, business owners are focused on working in their business, and they spend little to no time actually working on their business to properly structure it and position it so that it is sellable or can sell for an optimum valuation.
So that last part, is that mainly data gathering and evidence gathering and that kind of stuff, or is there a significant component of branding and making, like searchable client lists and that kind of stuff? Or what are the things that you mean by when you say working on the business versus in the business?
So every industry has some unique characteristics that can be related to that type of business or industry, but there are some really, really common mistakes that are made by business owners that can make all the difference in the world. So the first thing we see is just really, really poor accounting. Either they don't keep good track of it, it's not very professional. There are 2 ways to keep accounting. It's either on a cash basis or an accrual basis. If they do have accounting, it's almost always on a cash basis. But when someone's going to buy a business, they're going to want to see it, the accounting done on an accrual basis. And if it needs to be converted, they need to find an accounting professional, and that can they'll have to spend some money usually, and that takes some time to get that properly organized. The second thing we see is companies where we call it owner dependency, and that is a major turnoff for buyers. So in other words, if the business owner has the key knowledge, if there's some unique technical skills required, or that business owner is the dependency for that knowledge, that's going to be a red flag for a buyer. If that business owner has all the customer relationships or key vendor relationships, that's a red flag for buyers. If that business owner wants to sell and immediately leave the company, that's going to greatly reduce the number of interested buyers there will be for the business, because buyers are by nature risk averse. They want to have a future in the upside, but they want to be risk averse. So thinking about a long runway where a business owner stays in the business for a period of time after selling is going to be an attractive factor. If the business owner doesn't have a succession plan in place where there's a number two that is well trained and well positioned who could step in and take over and replace that business owner once he or she leaves and retires, that again is another optimum factor. So these are just a few of the key things. One of the other key drivers is what we call customer dependency. So almost all business buyers, especially if it's like going to be acquired by a private equity firm or a family office or some type of a financial buyer, almost none of those types of buyers are interested in buying a company where more than 20% of the business comes from a single customer. And so they just say, that's one of the first questions we get asked if somebody's interested in a company. What's their customer concentration? If we tell them it's north of 20%, our conversation is done with the vast majority of those buyers at that point. So those are just some of the characteristics. There's quite a few others, but those are the ones we see that are most critical to the whole process of either selling or successfully selling it all.
Yeah, I mean, by listening to how you're describing it, in my mind, I would probably, if I were in the shoes of the business owner, still make a difference or differentiate why something occurred in a certain way, right? Like if I had 25 or 30% of revenue coming from a certain source, that might be because there's just not that many in there, right? Like, I mean, I may give you an extreme example because I did that in the first half of my life as an Air Force officer in test flying. There were less than a handful of companies that you could even get stuff from or sell stuff to, right? Like, I mean, on the airliner side, if you include the Chinese, you have maybe 5 companies total in the world. That's surely one thing, but I hear what you're saying. If you're in an industry that has hundreds or thousands of potential organizations to do business with, and you only have 3 or 4, that is obviously a higher risk. I just have, and this goes to like, you mentioned PhD. You know what that stands for?
What does that stand?
It stands for piled high and deep. So if you do something long enough, you have it piled high and deep for a certain topic. Yeah. So, okay. With those things in place, one thing I wanted to ask you, because I'm now in this age group, ask people who I know and who have been doing their business, if they were to sell it, what they think they could get for it. And I wonder, you as an expert, how much are people overestimating the value of the company and why?
Yeah, we see that a lot. Actually, that's a fairly common characteristics when a business owner approaches us. But it's interesting. I mentioned the challenges around accounting earlier. You would be surprised at how many business owners don't actually know how much profit they make. We hear this all the time. For example, they don't know the difference between net income and EBITDA profit. Because most businesses are valued on a multiple of EBITDA profit. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to calculate it. So that's a starting point. One of the other significant challenges we find is that they call us and they say, well, I think my company's worth X because there's another company like mine in another city and they sold for some exorbitant amount of money. And the challenge is they don't understand the complexity of valuations and how deals are structured, because it's very common that the price isn't really the price. And that seems odd to say, but there are so many factors around how a deal is structured. So if a business owner hears that the Acme company down the road that does the same thing his company does sold for a crazy amount of money, he doesn't know if there was real estate included in that deal. He doesn't know if the buyers of that business required the owner to leave a lot of cash on the balance sheet, if there were huge receivables, or if he had to pay off all the debt on the business. These are all things that are not readily apparent. And since most smaller companies the transaction is not publicly available information, you don't really know those factors. Or that other buyer might have had super rapid growth, which would be more attractive, or here that business owner had proper accounting and a transition plan for his clients, or if they had a lot of reoccurring revenue from subscription-based business, whereas the other guy's company doesn't. These are all factors that can substantially impact the valuation of the business one way or another. So that's one of our first challenges, is to try to educate these business owners on what true valuations are. And we see so many kinds of companies, and we have access to databases where you can look up comparable industry-related sales. So we try to come to the table and truly educate them, not so we can try to win a piece of business. If we do, that's great. But again, this is a life-changing decision for this business owner. And if we can't give them a realistic, accurate valuation range based on what the market will bear, because at the end of the day, the price is going to be set by the market. If they're going to get a low valuation, it can completely change how they think about what they want to do with their company. So it's a huge, huge decision. And our goal is to just try to educate them on all the facts and options. And if it results in an engagement for us, it's a win-win. If it doesn't, then we've helped somebody along their path.
Absolutely. And I hope that you are successful as often as possible. And then when they have this pile of money, you send them our way so we can help them buy real estate from it, right? So one last thing that I wanted to bring up, because I was just, and I'm very grateful for that, invited to what they named an AI summit. And it was basically all kinds, 30 different quote unquote experts being asked, in your particular business, what are you doing? What can you do? What will you do in the use and implementation of AI? So I'm wondering a little bit, because, and you're the expert, so I have a rare opportunity here to ask. Every once in a while, I see something in the media where they're talking about business being sold, like Microsoft buys something or whatever, Amazon buys something. And there's oftentimes, at least when I get to see it, which is probably only the rare exceptional deals, something about the valuation being significantly based on forward earnings potential. And so for me, I've recently started thinking, okay, with all this talk about AI, is that something that you can see making a difference, or would people be getting a better valuation for their business if they could demonstrate that they're basically starting to have foresight and integrate those kind of things, or is that still too early?
That's a great question. And a lot of that would depend on the type of business. So typically, as you mentioned, businesses aren't valued based on forward-looking performance. Buyers want to buy them for that reason. The valuations are generally driven off of historical performance, oftentimes what we call trailing 12 months of financial performance. The forward-looking view is pretty prevalent in high-tech, low capital cost related types of businesses that have the potential for truly exponential growth. But a lot of more traditional industries, like let's say an HVAC repair company. I'm sure there's going to be effective utilization of AI in that business, maybe to do predictive modeling on when furnaces are going to break down or need repair, that sort of deal. But they're not going to be heavily driven, most likely, by the introduction of AI. In our own industry, as investment bankers, we definitely are leveraging some of the AI applications. One of my partners is pretty sharp with it now. I'm not nearly so, but it's a great source of background research for us on an industry or a company and how that company fits in an industry when we're preparing to package and market that company for sale. On our other side of things, believe it or not, it's still very difficult for investment bankers to find business owners at the time they're ready to sell. It's a bit of a needle in a haystack. So we've had a lot of AI-related firms approach us about helping with that, but so far none of them have got the formula quite right so that it interfaces the kind of standard demographics of perhaps the age of a business owner or an industry sector with some of the other behavioral patterns that might exist for a business owner at a time where he or she is really seriously thinking about selling. So at this stage, it's not a real strong leveraging tool for us in investment banking.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for describing that. I mean, I'm always been fascinated by innovation, probably has a little bit to do that. I was in test flying for the Air Force, so you kind of have that mindset. I personally, revealing it to our audience, but I think I've mentioned it a couple of times already. I can literally not wait when the time has come that I can have my own Optimus or my own robot. There's an abundance of labor, basically. And what they need is leadership. What they need is innovation, strategic thinking, that kind of stuff that will probably take longer to get into these AI machines, but that's kind of in the direction that I was thinking. Do you see that at all, or am I one of the rare people that even has some awareness of that?
Well, I think there are certain industries where that could be very applicable, especially with repetitive work, manufacturing assembly line. I mean, you see that already with robots in car factories, for
Yeah,
example.
exactly. Yeah.
I would never say it wouldn't happen, but let's say, for example, in a lot of service-related industries, again, I'll use an HVAC or a plumber or an electrician. You've got broken wiring in your house. I think it's going to be a human that's going to come out and fix that for probably in our lifetimes and maybe some time after that. Maybe somewhere down the road that does turn into a machine-based application, but same with we sell a fair number of like road construction companies. I don't know if I can envision robots driving steamrollers to compact asphalt or to run the machines that lay down the new asphalt or slurry seal that may be an application. Someday maybe so, but for right now,
Yeah.
I don't have the vision to see that as anything but humans.
So that would be interesting, but maybe you and I are retired by that. So totally unrelated to selling and buying companies or like helping people to buy real estate. If you could meet anybody, Cameron, who would it be and why?
This may not be a popular answer, but he's such a fascinating human being. And to be able to sit down and have a conversation on a broad range of subjects with somebody like an Elon Musk, and this doesn't have anything to do with his politics or some of the government related stuff. I just think as a person who has vision and has got his fingers in a lot of high tech related pies, he'd be a fascinating individual to talk to.
Yeah.
You mentioned very early on about continuing to learn. Man, would that be a learning experience for sure?
Absolutely. I was actually for a long time saying the exact same thing, Cameron. What occurred to me recently is the guy is under such scrutiny that I've come to the conclusion most of, what I decided who I would want to talk to?
Yeah.
His assistant. I would really like to understand how can you run these businesses. Nobody interviews the assistant, You do the Elon and I do the assistant, then we come back together and talk about it.
Sure.
Okay, Cameron, it was wonderful to have you on the show. Tell people who want to either learn more about buying a business, selling a business, or even kind of get started on that. How can they get in touch?
Great, thank you. So, you can reach me directly. Most people these days, I think, are on LinkedIn, so you can find me at Cameron Bishop on LinkedIn, or you can contact us at our firm Raincatcher, www.raincatcher.com.
Very cool. That's a cool name.
Our theory, Axel, was it's easier to catch rain than it is to make rain.
Okay. Thank you so much, Cameron.
Much pleasure to meet you, Axel.